The hole in the ceiling. Rahul and his two friends, Vikram and Anjali, had been searching for an affordable place to stay in the city. After weeks of searching, they finally found a flat on the first floor of an old, neglected apartment building. The rent was suspiciously low, but with no other options, they moved in. From the very first night, something felt off. The building was strangely silent, despite being in a densely populated area. The landlord, an old man named Mr. Sen, had seemed reluctant to rent it out, warning them, "Don't make too much noise at night, and if you hear something from upstairs, ignore it." They assumed it was just the quirks of an old landlord and settled in. But within days, Rahul started noticing strange occurrences. At night, soft whispers echoed from the ceiling, followed by faint shuffling sounds. It sounded as if someone was moving furniture upstairs, yet the second floor was supposedly unoccupied. One evening, while cleaning their room, Rahul discovered a small hole in the ceiling, partially covered by dust. It was just big enough to peek through. Out of curiosity, he climbed onto a chair and looked inside. What he saw sent a chill down his spine. The second floor was shrouded in a thick, swirling dust-like smoke, moving unnaturally as if it had a life of its own. Shapes flickered within it, shadows of people shifting in and out of sight. And then suddenly, something looked back at him. A pair of hollow, milky white eyes emerged from the smoke, staring directly into Rahul's. Shaken, he stumbled back, crashing onto the floor. Anjali and Vikram rushed to his side, but when he tried to explain what he saw, they dismissed it as exhaustion. But that night, as the clock struck 3 a.m., they all heard it. A slow, deliberate knock on the ceiling, directly above them. The forgotten past. The next morning, Rahul, Vikram, and Anjali sat in silence, the eerie knocking from the night before still fresh in their minds. None of them had the courage to check the hole again. "Maybe it's just rats," Vikram suggested, trying to lighten the mood. "Rats don't knock on ceilings," Anjali replied, her voice uneasy. Determined to find answers, Rahul decided to ask their landlord, Mr. Sen. They found him sitting in the building's courtyard, smoking a bidi, his face tense when he saw them approach. "Mr. Sen, what's upstairs?" Rahul asked bluntly. The old man hesitated before sighing. "I told you to ignore it." "But we can't," Anjali said. "Something is up there." Mr. Sen looked around, as if making sure no one else was listening, before speaking in a hushed tone. "That floor, it should have been sealed forever," he began. "Many years ago, a family lived there, Dr. Arvind Sharma, his wife, and their little daughter, Meera. They were quiet, kept to themselves, but one night, screams came from their apartment. No one dared to check. The next morning, we found the entire family dead." Rahul and Vikram exchanged nervous glances. "How did they die?" "That's the horrifying part," Mr. Sen whispered. "There were no signs of struggle, no wounds, nothing. Their faces were frozen in expressions of pure terror. It was as if they had seen something that drove them to death." Anjali shivered. "And the dust? The smoke-like thing we saw upstairs?" Mr. Sen nodded grimly. "Ever since that night, anyone who entered the second floor spoke of seeing strange movements in the air, as if something invisible was watching them. A few people tried to stay there over the years. Some ran away within days. Others never came out." A heavy silence fell over them. "Why don't you just demolish it?" Vikram asked. "We tried," Mr. Sen said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But the workers refused. They said something pushed them back. Some claimed to hear a child laughing or crying. No matter what we do, that floor remains untouched." Rahul felt his stomach twist. That meant whatever was up there was still waiting. That night, they all stayed together in the same room, too terrified to sleep. At exactly 3 a.m., the knocking returned, this time louder. Then something new happened. A small, eerie giggle came from above. Then the sound of something dragging across the floor. A shadow shifted beneath the hole, and then a tiny skeletal hand emerged, slowly reaching down. "What lies above?" Rahul, Vikram, and Anjali sat frozen, their eyes locked on the tiny skeletal hand emerging from the hole in the ceiling. It twitched unnaturally, its bony fingers curling and uncurling as if reaching for something or someone. Then came the whisper. "Come play with me." Anjali gasped and stumbled back. Vikram grabbed Rahul's arm, his fingers ice-cold with fear. None of them could move, their bodies paralyzed by an invisible force of dread. The whisper came again, closer. "Come upstairs. We've been waiting." The hand retreated into the hole, and for a moment everything was silent. But then the dust-like smoke started swirling again. It poured through the hole in the ceiling like a living thing, spiraling into their room. The air grew unbearably cold, and the lights flickered violently. And then the ceiling cracked open. A gaping hole split above them, revealing the second floor in its entirety. The room was pitch black, but within the swirling mist they saw them. Figures. A man, a woman, and a small child, their forms flickering like static, their eyes hollow and white. The ghosts of Dr. Arvind Sharma and his family. But there was something else behind them. A towering, shapeless shadow loomed in the darkness. It had no face, no form, just a shifting mass of darkness with countless hands stretching from it. And then the family screamed. Their mouths opened wide, but instead of voices, a horrifying static noise erupted from them, shaking the walls. The shadow lunged. Rahul grabbed Anjali and Vikram and bolted for the door, but it slammed shut on its own. The mist thickened, wrapping around them like suffocating hands. A cold whisper echoed from all around. "You shouldn't have looked." The lights burst. Everything went dark. For what felt like eternity, there was only silence. And then, the knock. A slow, rhythmic knock from the second floor. 3 knocks. Then the door creaked open. The landlord, Mr. Sen, and a few neighbors found the apartment empty the next morning. Rahul, Vikram, and Anjali were gone. Their belongings remained untouched, but there was no trace of them. Only the hole in the ceiling remained, slightly bigger than before. And that night, at exactly 3 a.m., Mr. Sen heard it again. The knock. The whisper. "Come play with us." The end.